certain jurisdictions around the world, particularly Japan, United Kingdom, Germany, which have very forward regulations to allow their natural gas infrastructure to switch to a larger and larger percentage of hydrogen.
Cycling itself emits no greenhouse gases. It reduces congestion. Even the rail trails and park paths that we have in this town, it stops developers from being able to build in these areas. So
significant challenges around how the demand for native plants is being met.
Our industry is just as affected as all by the lack of employable people.
Well, how hard can this be? Turns out it's definitely going to be harder.
The one trend I will tell you, which is not going to be a big surprise to anybody, is that we have an aging workforce.
Economic development really ignores boundaries, and we often have to reach out and work together.
Welcome everyone to the 10th and final Climate Forum of 2022. Fantastic that you're all here. And yes, we are continuing the third Thursday Climate Forums into 2023. So get your calendars out and mark them in there right now. We've had quite a great season of Climate Forums this year. And good that people are safe home. That was a bit of a gooey day today. So good that everybody has found their safe inside space, and we're glad to have you here. I'm Jenny Carver, and I'm a co-host with Lee, who will introduce himself as well. I think lots of you know him. So one of the things we've become really aware of is an integrating concept, which we think of as multi-solving. And when I think about the topic today, which is clearly one of interest around green jobs and how we grow our green economy going forward, we think about the sort of ripple effects and all the elements that come together to move us closer to addressing and finding solutions to our deep climate concerns. And we've had presentations around sustainable development and land use and regenerative agriculture and attainable housing. And, you know, as we hear about all these things, it becomes really clear that as you impact and find solutions in one sector or silo, there are impacts that are positive spin-offs, if you will, on other parts of our communities and on other actions that we want to take towards addressing the climate crisis. So that's what we call multi-solving. And when I think about the green economy, green jobs in the green economy, I think it's really important as we think about it, if we nurture, support, and grow our green economy locally, increasing access to green jobs, there will be that exponential sort of synergistic domino effect for people, for our communities, and for our planet. So it's really, for me, it's really helpful to think of all these pieces being really connected. But of course, today, we're really thinking about the green economy.
So thanks, Jenny. You stole all my thunder about multi-solving. But so I won't drabble on, but it really did stick with us, that one. And I encourage you to check out that previous episode of ours from a couple of months ago on multi-solving. Because it's really made climate action a bit more relevant to everyone we talk to around Gray and Bruce in this area. So we're continuing to talk about climate and biodiversity and equity issues in our region here on the traditional territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm currently on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe Nation, the people of the Three Fires, known as the Ojibwe and the Odawa, the Potawatomi Nations. And I'd like to thank the Chippewa and Nawash and the Chippewas of Saugeen, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, for being the traditional keepers of this land. And I know we at Climate Forum, we respect you and we respect your connection to the land. Now we kind of think of Climate Forum, we kind of think it helps us tie climate issues to our own priorities. So instead of going around telling everyone they have to make climate action a bigger priority, we're examining ways that we can address climate in our everyday actions. So the topic tonight is about jobs and the green economy. Thanks for joining. One of the ways you can make climate relevant is to talk about jobs. And now, thanks to our guest host, who is advocating for making climate action relevant by ensuring new jobs are coming along to support our communities. It's this month it's Barry Randall. Barry is my own sound friend and my former colleague at GB Susnet. And he lives a life.
My hat.
He lives a life that's very low impact to the environment. But I should say, Barry, before I give you the mic, what I appreciate most about Barry are all the positive changes he makes outside of his home. So in his workplace and his third places. So thanks for guiding us through Climate Forum tonight. Barry, over to you.
Thanks very much, Lee, and appreciate the generous introduction. It's true. I mean, I moved up here, could it be almost 40 years ago from Guelph, and I worked as the waste management master plan coordinator for the county of Bruce. It took 5 years to write a master plan that, from my perspective and many perspectives, was meant to increase things like recycling and waste reduction and organics and things like that. Unfortunately, the plan itself, I think, is still on a shelf somewhere, but that sort of was the beginning of a feeling that perhaps working for the government wasn't necessarily my best position. So I ended up working with some not-for-profit groups. That was my motivation to get together tonight as well, is using jobs and the economy as a way of bringing together many multi-solving petals in a theme that everyone can relate to, whether you're on the left side or the right side or in the middle or upside down. That theme of economic development, jobs, and healthy lifestyles and good and places to live, that's a common theme. And I think that the green job theme can, as I think Lee's already said, can bring us together. So tonight, we've pulled together a range of people representing corporate side, business, as well as the government side. And I think it's just a starting point to move us to future, not only Thursday climate forums, but in-person gatherings, personal connections, and that sort of thing, so that everyone's awareness of the resources out there to start their own business or to shift their business into a more environmentally friendly state, will have those resources available to us. So I was warned to not yabber on too much. And I told Jenny that I have a habit of doing that. She said, no problem.
Oh, I don't believe I did say that, Barry. So we'll just move right along now. Thanks, Barry. And it's great that we have you here because you have been, you're a good friend and also someone who's really walked the walk with environment, sustainability, and all these pieces. So, so we have Jeff Loney with us tonight, who is the manager of economic development at Bruce County. Great to have you with us tonight. Over to you, Jeff. I think you're going to talk a bit about sort of the current economic development plan strategy for Bruce, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jenny. Great. And great to see everybody tonight. When the organizers reached out to ask me to talk to you, I sort of went, I've only been here for a couple months, but how hard can this be? Turns out it's definitely going to be harder because Steve has made me go before him. And in this case, we're going to go with beauty before age with our friends in Grey County over there. But all of this to say, Steve and I will often sit beside each other in meetings and say what he said. So I decided to work a little bit instead of just telling you exactly what we're doing in Bruce County, to talk about what is economic development, why do I have this fancy title of economic development, and how that feeds into our green economy, and why it's important for our strategy here. So what is economic development? I could probably dig out a dictionary somewhere and give you this lovely long explanation as to what economic development does. But really, at the end of the day, the goal of economic development is to increase the economic well-being and the quality of life of those that we work with. So in my case, that's focused on Bruce County and the residents and the businesses located in Bruce County. Now, who does economic development? You'll often see in communities where economic development is talked about, that economic development manager did this but didn't do this, or the county's doing this and this organization's doing this. And those are pieces of our larger economic development. But a core tenet of what we talk about in economic development is that this is the responsibility of all of us. We all have a role to play in economic development, whether that's shopping at the businesses in your community and shopping local, whether that's promoting those to those around you. It's bringing friends and family to you so they can, let's be honest, ultimately spend money and grow our economy. Or it's helping others increase their quality of life. So why do economic development? If we look back in the history of municipalities, economic development was a position that really helped grow a tax base. So as many of you will know, property taxes are the main dollars that the municipalities get, and it's what we thrive upon to do what we do. So it comes to say, if we're going to go out there and get more people to pay more property taxes, at the end of the day, we're going to have the ability to grow our community and gain more revenue. But those have changed. Classical economic development, or smokestack chasers, as we like to call them, have really adjusted to focus on what I talked about at the beginning: the ability to increase the economic well-being and the quality of life of those that we serve as public servants. So that really brings us down to the what do we do in economic development. And I proudly will stand in front of our council and tell them that I do nothing. I don't create jobs. I don't build businesses. I don't build buildings. What our role in the economic development team is to promote and support a set of programs that make it easier for people like you'll hear later in the talk today to do all of those things, to build green technologies, to employ people in the green economy, and to focus and work towards the sustainability, economic well-being, and the quality of life of our communities. So I'm just a smokestack chaser. I'm just running out there trying to get as whatever I can, however I can, into our area. Well, that's not the truth anymore. Everything we do from an economic development perspective here in Bruce County has a focus on the 4 pillars of sustainability. We didn't come up with these. This is something that underlies all of the work that we like to do. Pillars is a great way to look at it, because if one pillar is off from another, everything's a bit askew. How to focus on all 4 of these pillars to make sure that our community continues to grow, and that those within our community that have those ideas can thrive. Focusing on the human side. So how can we find people to work in the businesses that we have? Employment is an issue. Things like our workforce attraction and retention strategy in Bruce County. How do we help people find meaningful careers and get involved in that workforce? So that sits on our sustainability side for human. Social, how do we ensure that basic services are available? And while this may not be the responsibility of our division specifically, how do we ensure that daycares are open? How do we ensure that housing is available for those that need it? Economic sustainability. This is where you're going to hear most economic developers play in the game mostly. And they're not wrong, but we acknowledge through all of the programs that we do that all 4 of these things need to be considered. And environmental being that last piece. Why attract or promote the other 3 if environmental sustainability is not considered through that process? You can look back 10, 20, 30 years, and you'll often hear communities talk about industry, the need for manufacturing, good jobs, And you may ask yourself in a lot of cases, why have large scale manufacturers left? Why don't we see those kind of jobs in communities anymore? And well, there's a multitude of reasons for this. What I can tell you is that the average large scale manufacturer across the country at this point has about a 12 to 18 year lifespan from a capital facility perspective. At that point, they need to make the decision whether they're reinvesting, whether they're staying in the area, or they're putting that same money into other jurisdictions, whether locally or globally. Green economy jobs last much longer than that. Manufacturers with green lenses on what they are doing are seen as have a longer lifespan in communities, contribute longer, and are able to ultimately create more of an impact on our communities. And that is why it is so important. So these are the 4 goals of the Bruce County Economic Development Strategic Plan. None of them are particularly surprising, I would guess, to the group here. We're looking at growing our tax base and our tax assessment so that we can support things like Barry said around waste management and road infrastructure and other key services that municipalities offer. If we grow the tax base, it makes it cheaper for all of us. It increases the quality of life for all of us, and we're able to support from that side. Growth of the population base. We want to see more people here. Communities in Bruce County are some of the fastest growing communities across Ontario, and that's brought with it some positives and some not as positives. Diversifying the economic base. When you think of Bruce County, you think of some major employers, but like our stock portfolios, we need to diversify to make sure that impacts in specific industries are not catastrophic to our regional economies. And then business retention and expansion. It's great if I'm telling you that I'm going to travel the world and go find all the biggest companies and bring them to Bruce County so that they can grow and create green economy and green jobs here in Bruce County. But academic research shows us that 87% of growth comes from businesses that are already located within a community. So a lot of our time is spent on learning how to keep our businesses in place, learning how to get them to grow, expand, and to some of the points that you'll be chatting about later, how do they become more sustainable and get involved in that green economy? So how does it actually fit into our day-to-day? We have programs at Bruce County that really focus on our 3 key sectors: agriculture, tourism, and energy. Now, these 3 sectors have drastically different needs, have drastically different problems, and need very different levels of support. But one thing that's consistent across the 3 of them is all of them are focused on the ability to sustain, the ability to grow and thrive where they are, and are all focused in their own ways on ensuring that sustainability continues to be a theme. COVID saw some interesting trends in tourism. 2020 saw for rural communities across Ontario, saw some of the busiest travel years. It meant that natural areas like Muskoka, like Bruce Peninsula, saw such an influx of travel that it became unsustainable. How do we focus programs on ensuring that people are able to visit in a sustainable manner, not just because we need to watch our environment and ensure things like trails are maintained and waste is dealt with, but how do we also make it so that that person wants to come back the next time that they come and visit? How do we keep those businesses economically sustainable, ensuring that visitors are spending money while they're here? The energy sector, you'll hear many talk about it's recession-proof. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't need support, that it doesn't need to grow. with partnership with the Clean Energy Frontier, a program with the Nuclear Innovation Institute, we work with Bruce Power in our area to support a robust supplier network. We're located across Grey, Bruce, and Huron, and are supporting those as best we can in growing, developing, and adapting to the changes. It was as recent as this week for those watching the energy sector that we saw the first step towards commercialization of something like fusion. How does this continue to change and adjust and look when we're not only looking at what does Bruce County look like in 2025, but what does it look like in 2035 and 2050? And then last but not least, agriculture. Bruce County is home to over 1,900 farms, accounting for almost 190,000 acres. This has changed and gone up and down over the past 10 years, but it is a large piece of what happens in our area. As a result of climate change, we've seen adjustments of where crops are grown, what crops are grown, where livestock is being used. But I can tell you that the work being done in this industry is focused on sustainability. How do they ensure that what they are doing is sustainable into the future? So our programs are focused on these three areas. They're focused on how do we support, how do we grow, and ultimately, as I said earlier in my chat, how do we make it so that our business owners, our entrepreneurs, and our citizens can ultimately make positive things happen here in Bruce County.
Thanks very much for that. And we'll after our next presenter, we'll come back, I think, with some questions that are already being put in the chat. So you can see those questions yourself. So if you don't need to duplicate questions that are in there. But right now, I'd like to bring on our second speaker, Steve Furness. And Steve's the manager of economic development and tourism with Grey County. I'll let Steve just follow up from Bruce County and tell us all about Grey County economic development and related to the green economy. Steve?
Great, thanks, Barry, and great job, Jeff. I like you going first. That was great. One of the things that so often, I'm not going to repeat what Jeff said. A lot of what Jeff talked about obviously applies to Grey. I will just add to one of the things that happens in economic development. It's a bit of a challenge for us at the municipal level. Is it's the one thing that just ignores municipal boundaries. And so when you talk about delivering municipal services, most services make sense within their boundary, but economic development really ignores boundaries, and we often have to reach out and work together. We were just in a show in Chicago, an agri processing show, and we were introducing ourselves from Ontario. We soon had to drop the Ontario part and just say we're from Canada. It was an international show, of course, but it just tells you that while we in the region think, oh, there's this, we are an economic region. And so Jeff and I, Bruce County, Huron County, will often work together. But I'll just summarize a little bit for Grey. For me, I like to think about economic development as trying to create wealth, and wealth does all those things that Jeff talked about. And of course, wealth has to be sustainable. And in doing that, we want to create community pride. We retain and expand existing businesses, and we really want to support investment attraction. But we spend a lot of time on the retention side. But you can, like retention, if you do a lot of work on retention, but you don't take care of community pride, and people locally aren't happy and not talking positively about your community, then you're not going to really win on the retention side. So there's lots of things that fall under economic development. And I used to say, whatever the issue is, that's what you got to deal with. So over the years, I've dealt with trying to bring in fiber optics, trying to recruit doctors, all things, anything that the community needs or there's an issue with can fall under that term, economic development. So Jeff's got it's not surprising that we've selected the same sectors. Grey County's just finished an investment attraction strategy. And our strategy is for investment attraction is going to be looking at clean energy, the ag sector, and tourism. There are other important sectors in our economy. You know, our retail, our downtowns, our manufacturing sector, and there's overlap with the manufacturing sector, of course. But the clean energy sector is just one there where there's opportunities that are presenting themselves. And this is in contrast to years ago when we used to have an auto parts sector, you know, in Sound. And that was driven by a free trade agreement and all the incentives that were driven years and years and years ago. But that was the only thing, you know, your productivity holding people here. It's when you talk about economic sustainability, if you have a competitive advantage based on your location, that's the best. No one's going to move you. They're going to stay where they are and work that. And I often think, you know, obviously farming and agriculture is going to be an important part because that's one of our resources locally. Tourism, we have a beautiful area. We have surrounded by water. We have lots of rivers. We have the escarpment. We have to manage that appropriately and correctly so that it's protected and sustainable. And on the clean energy side, you know, we have a nuclear facility that's within our economic region. We have hydrogen optimized that is relocated to our area. We have pumped storage potential in Meaford. A side sector off the nuclear is isotopes. So these are all sectors that are happening because of location decisions, and that's what we want to sustain. So there are other sectors that we could look at. I mean, Owen Sound at one point was a location logistics hub with the harbor, and that disappeared because of other technology that developed, rightly or wrongly. But that's what put Owen Sound on the map. And so things can change. And I am old enough to remember when the nuclear facility was going to be closed down. The population of Bruce County just started to decline, and then it was sold to the private sector, and then it became the entity it is today. So nothing is for sure, and you have to work hard to promote and retain and keep talking about that sustainability. And I'll just talk a little bit about one of the other sustainable issues is labor force. You know, 5-6 years ago when Bruce Power, new management, new leadership there said, we want the suppliers to locate locally. That was a conscious decision by Bruce Power to do that. And I think it's now over 60 major employers have relocated mostly to Bruce Power, into the Bruce County area. But the employment impact is right across Great Bruce and Huron. And so we had to work really hard to find the labor pool and the skill sets. So that was one of the reasons Grey County made the decision to purchase the former Sydenham School, which is right next to Georgian College. And we've really positioning this as a training center. And it's amazing, even though COVID's been happening, how much training has been happening. Lots of at heights training. We have things that are non-nuclear happening here in terms of long-term care, healthcare training that's going on linked to the college. And we have, if you came to the hallways right today, you would see brand new car engines in the hallway for the college students because they're running their auto program out of some of the classrooms. But going forward, Georgian College is looking at what's needed and how they can meet the needs of industry, including the nuclear sector and our manufacturers. So it all kind of together, and Jeff's right to say that we're all work together. I could go into later on to some of the opportunities we had that we didn't land that maybe people don't know about, like the solar panel facility that we nearly had, or the wind blade manufacturing or tower facility that we just about had. But we'll talk about that later. I'll just end it there. We work all together, and we try to work collaboratively with our industry, and it is an ongoing and evolving opportunities. Nothing is for sure, so you have to work hard at it. I'll end there.
Thanks so much, Steve. That's great. And a great kind of combination of the pillars and the theoretical elements to some extent, the framework, and then hearing some of your actual thoughts on the bits and pieces and the actual employers. So we've got a few questions, so I'm just going to run through them here. Jennifer's first question was for, I think it's for Jeff, because it was a statement you made. What evidence do you have for your statement that green economy jobs last longer in a specific community area?
So there's a number of academic research papers out there that are based on sort of longitudinal studies and show the impact of green jobs essentially being better job creators in our current, including post-COVID world. I'm happy to pull up one or a couple of those and drop it in the chat here for you.
That'd be great, because it's really about green employers that last, right? You were saying that because they're thinking over the longer term rather than that shorter life cycle of a manufacturer. So that'd be great if you can throw in some resources for us. Julie asks Jeff as well, what's your definition of a green economy? And in relation to that, what policies are in place in Bruce to ensure continuous growth can be sustainable with regards to our environment? So protecting forests, water, etc.
We're putting my economics background to the test today. That's okay. So when I think green economy, it's really about how we deal with the economic sustainability piece, where we can sort of create economic interaction that lives in harmony with humans and nature. It's jobs that all fit into that. So similar to when we talk about innovation, most people's minds go to technology. We know that innovation is more than technology. To green economics, people will often think of, as Steve was talking, the sort of clean energy stuff, but it's more than that, and it's the ability to create jobs and businesses that have positive outcome on our economic interaction between humans and nature.
Okay, and then in terms of policies that kind of underscore that, in terms of environment protection, anything around that specifically in Bruce County?
Yeah, and so our official plans, our zoning bylaws at local municipality levels, and the work that's being done through that are there. I will draw the line in the sand and say I am not the planner and not the expert here on those different pieces. But there's a reason we have environmentally protected land. There's a reason we focus on the sustainability of employment lands, sustainability of agricultural lands, and that is built into our official plans, which is the guiding document for land use planning.
Great, thanks. Julie, you might be interested to look at the follow-up question and answer that's on our channel, where that exact question was posed to the planners around what is sustainable growth and what's the what are the edges of that. So you might want to have a peek at that. Another one for you, Jeff, pull out your economics and tourism textbook out of your brain. From Joachim, what is your definition of sustainable tourism? Related to environmental impacts, including greenhouse gas emissions, etc.
Sure, and you'll hear me say it over and over again tonight, but sustainability is looked at in those 4 pillars from our side. So sustainable tourism is tourism that really takes into account those 4 pillars currently and into the future. So social and environmental impacts, the needs of visitors in the industry, the environments, the host communities. How do we lower the negative impacts, which includes things like economic leakages, damage to the natural environment, overcrowding are some of the ones that we look at, while we promote the positive impacts that are, cultural heritage preservation, job creation, resident attraction, wildlife preservation, and landscape restoration. Those types of things, that is sustainable tourism in our world.
Okay, and is there a definition of sustainable tourism within either of the counties that we're aware of?
I don't think there is on our side, and I'll defer to Steve. I do know that we we, in conjunction with national parks, lower tier municipalities, and some larger tourism businesses, have what we call the Sustainable Tourism Action Group, specifically focused on the peninsula. And what I talked about is sort of the guiding principles of that group.
Steve, what might you do to support Eat Local Grey Bruce, which looks to be in difficult situation, yet is making a really important contribution to local farmers and food producers, and to provide good organic, often food to local consumers? So how might Economic Development Grey help with that?
Yeah, good question. Well, we gave them space here at Sydenham campus as a location and as a drop-off point, free of charge. I just made that offer to them, and the answer was she was going to go back to their board. I said, I don't know what we could do. How might we help? I don't know. So I posed that question, but we're open and willing, depending on how we could help. But they have a drop-off point. We cleaned out one of the rooms at Sydenham campus. It's a good drop-off point. I guess, there's always challenges, but I'm open.
Just quickly, I mean, the Eat Local Grey Bruce is a fabulous example of a very creative and innovative, I believe it's a not-for-profit entity that facilitates the growth of other businesses in the area. So I think that's a great example of how innovative new businesses that are a little different than others can help other businesses on the ground. So we need more of those.
Well, I think it's more than a drop-off point is needed at this point. It's a very my son is a farmer that actually sells some stuff through Eat Local Grey Bruce, and some of the other farmers on the road are both involved with the board and with the activities that they do. It's a difficult thing to sustain, and it needs support of the municipalities as well as of individuals and so on. It's been growing for 3 or 4 years, and financial support may be part of what it needs. I haven't got all the details. I just know that it's in financial difficulty right now, and it may not survive. And yet it's been a really important resource for a range of farmers and people who produce bread and other food products. Absolutely. And so on. Yeah. And gets them known in the area.
I don't know what all those challenges are, and I appreciate that. We do think it's an important piece, and you're talking about promoting local businesses in the ag sector, and so we just they haven't. It's a new location here, or drop off in the Sydenham campus. That just happened shortly. So I just had the conversation with them that said, well, talk to your board and let me know how we might help. Not that I can wave a wand, but I can certainly take any request and see what we can do. So we're willing and we're supportive, depending on what role we might play. So
great. 100% agree with you, Jennifer. It's a core connector service and support for all of us in the community. I'm going to do one more question, then we're going to move on. A question from John Anderson to Steve. I wonder if there is a way we can create electricity locally and use it locally.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's certain individuals, entrepreneurs who are doing that through different projects. I don't know if you've toured the Lewis Farm Solar Samsung project that they've done. So he's doing, their sheep farming with the solar panels. That's a pretty significant facility. And yet there's also a lot of solar panels on a lot of roofs that you may not know because you can't see them on the building. But some of the buildings, in particular in Owen Sound, there's quite a number of them that are getting solar panels on them, and yet I think there's more that could be done there. And certainly when the FIT program was running, we saw a lot of people jump on that, and maybe that the economics of small scale power producers will come to the point where there won't be a need for a subsidy and they'll be standalone on their own. And I don't know how close we are to that. I mean, certainly if it happens, we'll certainly be encouraging it. And I think one of the challenges there is this is where we have to work closely with our planning department. It may be that the opportunities need some adjustment in our planning policy to allow some of this and still respect what planning policy is about. And that's making sure we don't create conflict and we, when I say sustainability, we don't want conflict between uses and have it in the right neighborhoods. So whether that's solar or some other energy form, I mean, we have a couple waterfalls here. Why can't we harness those? And yet, I don't know that it makes economic sense yet. So
there's a lot of elements to that, but it sounds like it's one to pick up as a deeper conversation around how we can do that. Because there's lots of folks that have done the net metering, and there's some issues with hydro. And it's complicated, but it's a good question that we should be pushing along.
Luke Cook is operator, owner, management, head honcho at Cook's Plumbing and Heating. And a number of us on the screen, I'm sure, have connected with him as far as everything related to plumbing and heating, and more recently, things like heat pumps, air sourced heat pumps, and those sorts of things. So that's what we've asked Luke to come and tell us a little bit about today, is along with the other speakers, sort of what's the business, what's the work that you do, and what makes it a climate conscious business. Do you have any labor needs? What are the opportunities in your sector? And what do you need to move forward as far as creating more new opportunities for employees and green jobs in the area? So over to you, Luke.
Hi, everybody. I'm Luke Cook, Cook's Plumbing and Heating. We are a plumbing, heating, electrical contractor. We've always specialized in the heat pump market and tried to market ourselves in that direction because it aligns with our beliefs. The heat pump market, much like solar, has always been very incentive driven due to the larger capital investment and longer return on investment things, but that is the reason we are diversified into standard conventional propane, natural gas, electric systems. But anytime there is an incentive available, we certainly do try to capitalize and market that. Currently, there's some incentive available through a greener home incentive, primarily for forced air, ducted and ductless ground and air sourced heat pumps. It's a good starting point. It's very interesting. I feel they are, there's been an announcement they are growing that incentive, which is exciting. I don't know much more about the growth of that incentive beyond the initial announcement they've made. But it's nice to see that the government is starting to incentivize heat pumps and that, and we're certainly shifting our gears to get our workforce in that direction, as we have done during any other incentive boom for the heat pump market in the past. So yes, we certainly struggles employment. Our industry is just as affected as all by the lack of employable people, and so we've always, our strategy, and it's worked well, but is a long-term strategy, has been to grow from within. We tend to train young guys up and have had good success, but that is a long-term plan. Our area, I think, has some particular issues with getting licensed journeyman class people that would allow us to have more apprentices underneath them. I think the power plant draws a lot of these very skilled people away from private industry in our area, and we have a hard time competing with that. We're just far enough from Toronto. People aren't quite willing to relocate this far away. But anyways, that's probably why we have had our best growth from young local people growing from within. And that is the vast majority of our current employees. And but every day looking for new help. Unfortunately, we are at a point where I can't bring in any more apprentices until I get more licensed journeymen. So we've hit that bottleneck that is apprenticeship, and there's some things that should or could change in that world to allow more younger people to be trained. But yeah, we have apprentices, and with heat pumps, it would be mostly air conditioning and refrigeration mechanics would be the trade names for the people that would install heat pumps of any type. But that really is our biggest inhibitor to growth is gaining employees. But yeah, we've done lots of environmentally projects. We did some solar thermal stuff, which is very much like the photovoltaic solar, which we don't currently offer. But again, it's very incentive driven. Again, solar thermal is making hot water with solar. It's hard to develop a program that has any actual fiscal return on investment beyond just the real green idea of it all. But that's why the incentive is required to push that and to drive those markets. But anytime that the market is there, we certainly try to do what we can to promote that. And yeah, like I said, we tend to shift our gears away from the conventional, you might say, bread and butter of a mechanical business into these other more environmentally friendly technologies, and certainly have the experts that know how to work and install those products.
I'm actually super excited to have Ted Stewart here tonight. I'm a bit of a hydrogen nerd these days, so I'm really happy that he's at the table. And Ted is Vice President of Product Strategy at Hydrogen Optimized here in Owen Sound, which is, again, so fabulous. And he's actually a significant leader in the technology, manufacturing, and product development side of the business. He's a listed inventor on 3 patents and has I think 3 others pending. For the company's innovative rugged cell high current water electrolysis systems. So the Stewarts, I don't know if folks know, but the Stewart family, I think his great grandfather was maybe born in 1882 and was one of the first developers of the whole electrolysis system and the Stewart cell and the fuel cell. So they're famous hydrogen folk and have continued through 4 generations to be leaders in the development of hydrogen technologies.
Well, thank you very much, Jenny. It very well researched introduction, and thank you for that. It's a pleasure to be here speaking. So why don't I share my screen and then show a few slides. So Hydrogen Optimize, we're here in Owen Sound. We just talking about our company for a second. We have our parent company, Key to Age Technologies. We were founded and grew from this parent company. We have a sister office in Collingwood that has our deteriorating business in it. And that's where initially Hydrogen Optimize grew out of. So a bit about Hydrogen Optimize ourselves. What do we actually do? So we take, what our product does is we take renewable green electricity, whether it be from solar, wind, nuclear, all sorts of other sources. And what our product does is convert that from AC electricity into green hydrogen. Some people might have heard that we have had a recent strategic partnership with ABB, and where they fit in the mix is they can take the electricity from AC and convert it to the DC type of electricity that our equipment requires, so that our equipment can produce the green hydrogen. Where the green hydrogen is consumed could be a vast variety of different applications that range from large-scale industrial and chemical applications such as ammonia, methanol, steel, e-fuels such as e-methanol, and the list goes on, to direct hydrogen fuel cell applications in fleet mobility. Typically, we're seeing things like mining and rail and aviation and shipping being direct fleet mobility applications that are very popular. But alternatively, there's projects right here in Ontario that are taking hydrogen and blending it in our natural gas infrastructure to displace, and in some cases around the world, completely replace distributed gas pipe infrastructure, where you still have a flame that can get to houses, but when you burn the flame, no carbon's emitted. And then, of course, there's some element of storage and buffering, and what really the big power applications is for export power. So take a country like Japan or South Korea that imports today most of their energy as liquid natural gas. They have a strategy to start importing hydrogen or hydrogen carrying chemicals, to import those into those countries to produce their power instead of liquid natural gas as their global energy commodity. So it's a very diverse industry, but the whole theme between all these areas that I always tell to public groups is that you're not going to hear it in the consumer store. It's down 3 or 4 steps in the logistics and supply chains for heavy industry. It's not you're not when you're hearing about things made from hydrogen-based processes, it's going to be hearing about a car made with zero carbon steel, where your car itself is going to be made completely environmentally neutral. You're not going to be hearing about a car made with steel with green hydrogen in it. You're not going to be hearing that. So because of this, it's all the hard to abate industries, which happen to be the non-consumer industries. Those two overlap quite well. And so that's what I always tell to the public of why haven't I heard about hydrogen or large scale electrolysis, because it's typically 2 or 3 stages down in large industrial applications. So going forward in this, we also ABB partners and control systems all around the package. So Jenny highlighted the visits in Newfoundland from the Prime Minister and Chancellor Schultz. This is where we executed this ABB deal. ABB is a multinational global power electronics and robotics and system control company. So it's really a strategic alliance between our two companies to be able to take this product to markets with using our skills in hydrogen and the kind of the downstream sides of the process, and ABB's expertise in electricity in the upstream side. So at Hydrogen Optimize, as Jenny was saying, we really try to focus on the large scale of the market. There's lots of conventional electrolyzers that have been around for a long time that do very well at the small scales, but we really try to look at the tens to hundreds of megawatts to the scales that are even towards the gigawatts of input electricity power into the units. These are the types of scales, for context, to decarbonize a steel plant, that's about 700 megawatts. It's a large number to decarbonize a single steel plant. To decarbonize a world-class ammonia plant might be a gigawatt. To decarbonize all of Canada's natural gas, we replaced all of our natural gas with hydrogen tomorrow, it would be in the hundreds of gigawatts. So if we're actually trying to debate the hard to debate industries, where you can't take oxygen out of iron ore without a carrier like carbon or hydrogen, it's going to require gigawatts of electrolysis around the world for the hardest to abate industries, and really require a different scale of water electrolyzers than what's in the market today. As Jenny was highlighting, my family's been in the industry for 117, 18 years or so, designing and selling water electrolyzers. Over 1,000 Stuart cell plants have been sold into over 100 countries between the past few generations of my family. We've applied hydrogen technologies to different markets and scales over time. Always been a theme for large scale industrial being our core focus, but adapted to small scale commercial vehicle filling and all sorts of other applications as those niches became more in demand. But it's really with the core of that legacy and original history on that large scale technologies where we've drawn upon for the current generation that Hydrogen Optimize is commercializing, particularly with the unipolar type architecture. Unipolar is just how we build our cells compared to other folks. It results in different stacks of scales. And for the folks that are still trying to figure out what electrolysis is, that didn't get it from the previous dialogue, it's you put water in, electricity in, and you get hydrogen oxygen out. You're splitting water up to hydrogen and oxygen. So right now, with different types of electrolyzer, it's all about just how you pass electricity through water so you can split it up differently. So this is what I was describing earlier. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but conventionals with the bipolar type technology, we have many cells in series as opposed to our type technology where you have one big cell in parallel. So we have our high current demonstration systems in Owen Sound, where we are doing our large scale demonstrations of what these systems look like, as well as system R&D. Additionally, this is what those systems look like as you integrate them together. So you take those cells and you slowly add them together in series to make a high current and high voltage plant for large scale hydrogen. And this is what it kind of looks like from a philosophical perspective. So if you're looking to repeat, to achieve large scale with a lot of different energy technologies in hydrogen, they come with integrated containerized packages where you have to start repeating hundreds of packages to truly get to the large scale. Here at Hydrogen Optimized, we have a large scale plant design philosophy where we really try to drive economies of scale by differential design as opposed to just shipping out another identical unit, which has repeated installation costs, which has repeated part costs where you can't scale your cooling systems, your rectifiers, your substations, the list goes on. It really costs, it really should get the economics from them, you don't get otherwise. And now this is probably the slide that more people are looking for and how it ties into local economic development and the Owen Sound picture. So we moved in about 2 years ago, about just shy of 2 years ago, February, we had our first person operating at Owen Sound, but about 2 years ago, we took over a section of the old Tenneco factory. When we moved into it, there were still Tenneco employees working in it, but over time, we've now occupying about a third of it, and we have the ability to increase our footprint in it. So here we do everything. We do everything from our corporate sales to our corporate management to our R&D to our manufacturing. And we've really scaled up the amount of people and operations we've had in this facility. We started when we moved here with 5. We quickly grew to about 20. Today, I think we have about 45, 50 working in this facility, but we've, in the past month and a half, we've added 6 people, 5 of which are engineers. And I know we already have 4 extra people starting in January, and probably more people in February, probably growing at a rate of about 3 or so people a month, which I would project to keep going. We have just finished installing one of our first large manufacturing lines in the facility, or in the next week or 2, the details will be polished up. But this would, when we turn that manufacturing line on to full capacity, it would create about another 80 jobs in additional to the ones that have been mentioned. That number has the potential to grow over time, but our general strategy right now is that we're investing quite a bit of money in 2023 to increase that capacity by 5 times, as well as invest in further levels of automation. But our goal as our company is, once we bring this workforce on, is to upskill them in the further automated and vertically integrated equipment. So our production rates increase, but our labor keeps consistent in the number of labor when it comes to this, because when we switch from manual to automatic based manufacturing equipment, we're also at the same time we're going to stage a production rate increase. So make sure we upskill our labor force as opposed to need to change it dramatically. And we have long-term plans to make Owen Sound our really essential node in a network of global factories that are under development. We hope to manufacture for Canada and most of the North American market, most of the equipment here, but we do have about 5 or 6 factory locations that are in different stages of development, 1 or 2 publicly announced, which would be further on the final assembly and some of the other components. But we hope to keep the high value light components manufactured in Owen Sound to export to the network of global factories we're under development and manufacturing for the Canadian and other markets out of Owen Sound. And critically, the manufacturing center of excellence, where we develop our manufacturing technologies and integrate with an R&D to update what those facilities look like in those sister or the locations that are in the early stages of development now. And that is, I think, all I had to say on the direct presentation, but I'm certainly open for more questions or to answer some of the questions I was sent ahead of time.
This is a great example of the range of types of jobs that kind of fall into the green economy sector, so to speak, because we move from Hydrogen Optimized to Scenic Cycle, bike shop in Owen Sound, operated by Brandon Bragg. And Brandon's just going to share a little bit about what he does, maybe what some of his background is, and what the needs and opportunities are out there to create a more bike-friendly Owen Sound and region, so that, and I know there's some topics like e-bikes and that sort of thing that he's going to touch on that are a really exciting part of the way things are moving. So there you are, Brandon. You got.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon. I run a small bike shop in Owen Sound called Scenic Cycle. Was more or less honestly here for a free education, and I've gotten that from a few of you. Thank you very much. But as far as my job and what I do, it's passion to bikes, but it is very tied to the green community. And I think most people that cycle do have a level of green feelings, that there are things that they consider, not just that it's cheap, but it is a better way of living all around. I'm coming from Guelph, but once upon a time I'm from Toronto, and you could beat a bus from a couple major city sections by bike by moments at a time. So I guess all of that I'm watching is making me more inspired to contribute to that, and it makes me think, what was Guelph like, what was Toronto like, and what, if anything, is Owen Sound missing that these other cities and towns did have that made them green driven. We have some pretty congested streets during some busy parts of the day, and it's such a small town but it feels like downtown Toronto for a couple of those city blocks some days. And I wonder now, is there more bike lanes that could be opened to give people more confidence that they would be safe on these roads to start commuting by bike? We do have a lot of very major hills in all directions. It is a gully, so this could be hard for people to get from one point of the city to the other. So e-bikes do have a great place in this world. In Europe, cycling is a big part of their lives, daily lives, from commuting to work. I was just reading, I'm trying to get caught up on some knowledge here to spread to you guys. But I read that Denmark, 25% of their trips are under 3 kilometers are done by bicycle. Most of Owen Sound you can reach within 3 kilometers, but how many of us do drive and do take cars just to climb up those hills, because they are such treacherous hills? And I moved to a smaller town because I wanted to be a part of that kind of growing community, and see what I can do to help. And that's really why I wanted to sit down for this. I'm here for the free education. It's a first step for me to learn how I can contribute to it. So yeah, I've been doing this. I've been owning this store now for 3 years. I sell electric bikes, regular pedal power bikes. I also deal in secondhand. I hate to see bikes get scrapped or thrown out. Even kids' bikes, I'd rather fix them up and donate them rather than let them just go to scrap heaps. And yeah, I'm not sure what more to say. I mean, we all know that cycling itself emits no greenhouse gases. It reduces congestion. Even the rail trails and park paths that we have in this town, it stops developers from being able to build in these areas. So cycling paths and promoting for more cycling paths will block some areas to be able to be built.
That's great, Brandon. Thanks. And one would think that there could be a whole economy around the biking industry sector that, I don't know, those would be competitors for you, or else you can grow a large supply there. But really interesting to hear.
Absolutely. And I have had a few people come to me looking to buy rental fleets of electric bikes and regular bikes to run little delivery systems in Port Elgin. I think it was Jeff that was saying earlier, and getting my wheels turning about, considering what I do for a living and what my passions are, but how do I involve as much as possible, because that is what makes it sustainable. It's like learning to sell online. It is a part of the future, and people are going to continue thinking in this direction. You can be a part of it or behind. But yeah, I see it now. I want to be a part of it.
That's great. That's great. And there are some questions coming for you. We're going to go to the questions for now for Luke, Ted, and for you. Going back to Joachim. This is a question for you, Ted. What is the chance that hydrogen would ever replace fossil gas for home heating? If so, how practical would that be?
So I've met with one company, Superior Propane particularly, who has that as an objective. So our business model is to make the equipment to sell to people to own and operate. Then they might sell the hydrogen or use it themselves. So we meet with a lot of folks who are on that side of the business model. So Superior Propane, who has 130 distribution centers across Canada, is looking to create a parallel hydrogen distribution network to enable home heating from hydrogen in very similar ways that we do home heating from propane. Now, is that economic today? No, I don't think so. But in the right incentives, in the right places, we're going to see some early applications, and we're looking at hard to abate industries in the long term. Some of the areas where that is getting the most traction is the farther north in Canada, where there's higher degree of climate targets than perhaps in Ontario and Southern Ontario. But it is my grandfather refused to take some certain types of home heatings in his farm because he wanted to wait until hydrogen was ready to go into it. It's, I think where home heating has already happened right now is when it's blending into the existing natural gas infrastructure.
Right.
So in the United Kingdom, for example, there's certain areas where up to 30–40% of their natural gas is now hydrogen in their infrastructure. And in the United Kingdom, if you're installing a new home natural gas boiler, it has to be hydrogen ready to be converted to 100% hydrogen if you buy a new boiler today. So we don't have those policies in Canada yet, but there's certain jurisdictions around the world, particularly Japan, United Kingdom, Germany, which have very forward regulations to allow their natural gas infrastructure to switch to a larger and larger percentage of hydrogen. And we're going to see if companies like Superior Propane make the business model of delivered as opposed to pipelined into the home business model successful in Canada.
I got so many questions I want to ask you, but I'm not allowed. I'm going to have to follow up. So I'm going to go with our audience ones. Chris Hodgkinson has a question. Ted, do you capture oxygen and have a market for the oxygen also? What kind of workers are you looking for? So two pieces.
So I responded to the first one in text because I ramble on that one too much. Back of the book, it's very cheap to make oxygen industrially, and it's very hard to compete. If there's a steel mill, if there's a fish farm, if there's a municipal waste treatment plant, then there might be right next to the project site, then there might be an application from it, but the cost to compress, purify, and dispense is usually more than the economic return back of investing in that equipment to do that, where you could just vent it into the atmosphere and just add oxygen to the air in a beneficial way to the earth otherwise. So back to the book is that it does happen, but it's less, it's 20% or less of projects would use it. The other question on types of people, in the community, we've hired everything from almost every type of engineering discipline to scientists to people in sales to our marketing to material managers to all sorts of jobs that work on the factory floor, right from all sorts of different roles. The little thing on the hiring is that we've hired back now many folks that used to work at Tenneco, the auto parts plant that closed down. We have about 8 or 9 folks that used to work at Tenneco we've hired back now. But we have a very large diversity in what types of roles we offer. It depends what's hiring that month. You know, the last 2 months we hired about 6 engineers. So the last 2 months were kind of the engineering heavy month. But the next month we're hiring a few other departments. So we always take resumes in, and then if we get around to hiring that category, then we consider it.
Luke, would it be beneficial for regulatory change to journeyman/apprentice ratios?
I would strongly support the change in journeyman to apprenticeship ratios. Currently, if you have 1 journeyman, you're allowed to have 1 apprentice in most red seal trades in our mechanical industry. As soon as you want to have 2 apprentices in most of our trades, you need to have then 3 journeymen to have 2 apprentices. So it is a very stringent ratio currently. I think had this happened 10 to 20 years ago, we wouldn't be facing this shortage of tradespeople right now. So yes, absolutely. I think we need a fairly dramatic change in apprenticeship ratios. Again, long-term plan. All these apprenticeships they're a 5-year apprenticeship to become a journeyman. And then naturally a journeyman takes a couple of years to become a real professional journeyman. So a change today we won't see for 5 to 7 years, but I think a change would be in the right direction.
So there's something for, again, one of those sort of things to push for a larger climate action picture. Those kinds of things would make a really big difference for how much we can be doing locally. Question from Vivian for Ted. Why did Hydrogen Optimized choose Owen Sound as a location for its business?
That's a great question. So we originally were founded in Collingwood. So Steve had talked earlier about how the regions blend in with each other, and Collingwood's literally on the tip of Grey County. I've lived in Grey County since I was 7 years old or so, but spent much of my life working and going to school in Simcoe. So when the company was growing in Collingwood, we said, we ran out of space in our facility. We looked for more facilities in Collingwood. They didn't have the right industrial infrastructure, how they structure their industrial parks and the whole community succeed for manufacturing. It wasn't, the community in Collingwood was not set up to succeed it's completely forgotten searching for smokestacks, as was mentioned earlier. You can't put up any of those in Collingwood, and there's none existing that's available. And so we are really trying to find a community that we're pro-manufacturing, that with industrial infrastructure, labor force, and the community ready to manufacture, but not too far away from our base, because we would immediately transfer 15 people, 20 people who are working in Collingwood with families and lives to working to our new facility. So we're really looking at for something for an hour in radius. And so Owen Sound was the site that we selected as being, Steve Furness did a great job, and everyone else did a great job in the community. The mayor was very supportive, and the warden was very supportive, and we just felt both the industrial infrastructure and labor force were here in the county compared to the other options we're looking at.
Great.
Particularly with this Tenneco facility opportunity, where we literally walked in and rehired a decent amount of the Tenneco employees to start our manufacturing capabilities.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Again, for you, Ted, which industries in Ontario are interested in using green hydrogen instead of fossil fuels to power their production? And she suggests like cement mixing, refining.
So I have always,
steel, yeah.
my grandfather used to say we haven't had a good energy minister in this province since Hepburn was elected in 1935. But I've met personally a few times now with their current energy minister, and I am rather optimistic. I was there when they announced the hydrogen strategy for the province, and I think we'll see what happens, but right now we're giving away a lot of electricity. We're actually paying New York and Michigan and a few other states to take away electricity when we have too much on our grid, where we could be putting that into controllable demands like electrolyzers. And there's some good progress on that type of discussion, and creating a hydro rate specifically for extremely controllable demands. There's certain hydro rates for medium controllable demands, but I'm saying controllable within 10 seconds as opposed to an hour or two, which would be a game changer in how we can manage our grid, and would allow more renewables on for the first place. But also, if we're dumping this money, instead of paying other electricity producers to take electricity off as a service, it would be producing value-added product, store and use on demand. So I have some optimism that we'll have that, which would really open up the Ontario market. But my more cynical side of me says that out of those 1,000 plants I mentioned earlier that we sold, only about 1 or 2 of them are in Ontario. And we've had a long track record of exporting. But
is there a hydrogen lobby?
I'm a board member of the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association, and we did do a Parliament Hill Day this year.
Yeah.
But but the back of the book, the last answer is, in Ontario, I am seeing movement in this cement industry, as you say, the refining industry. There's a few oil refineries in Ontario that could refine it with less carbon if they use hydrogen instead of natural gas-based hydrogen. And the steel industry by 2030s could be using a lot of hydrogen, but we'll see if there's anything before 2025.
Right. Thanks, Ted. For Brandon, what do people tell you how safe they feel with kids biking in Owen Sound?
Well, I don't have a lot of actually young customers. It is definitely an older demographic in this town, but from what I've seen, it's one of two ways. It's either the scenic side, and that's your parks and paths. A lot of throw the bikes into the car, the truck, and just head slightly out of town to location. And in that respect, it's amazing for all of us. When it comes to city riding, I mean, with the hills on all sides, even smaller distances, kids are taking the bus up those hills. So I think maybe making medication to the different paths that are out there that can show them direction without getting into traffic, to be able to take their bikes. I think as well, just like ride programs, every now and again, it's a bit of a wake-up call if they were to do crackdowns on motorists that aren't paying attention to cyclists, and likewise cyclists that don't have bells and lights, things that they can do to keep themselves safe on the road as well. Understanding on all parts that cycling falls under the traffic laws. Anything that a car can get fined for, a bike can be fined for. So remembering to be in your lane, not on the sidewalk, use your signals. But bringing that into people's face daily is what's going to help make it normal for them, so they see it more. So certainly it takes a lot of advocacy to stress to people that it's happening now. People are going to start cycling. You need to pay attention. I'm from Toronto. I used to cycle downtown all the time, and that 10th Street at that corner, I'm nervous. I usually cut behind onto First Street and cut by the Shoppers Drug Mart to get into Harrison Park, because I think everybody just has that I'm just going to go for it attitude with their cars because there's so many blind spots in those streets. What you can do to fix that, that's brighter minds than me, which I hear a lot of you guys are here. But yeah, I think advocacy and definitely, cracking down on motorists and watching for cyclists. There are many rules that even cyclists don't know they have, or rights that they have, or rights that they don't have as well.
Fair enough. Okay.
Hope that helps.
Thanks, Brandon. And we have a last question for Luke, and then I think we'll move on. Luke, Jennifer asks, do you have heat pumps suitable for tiny houses? They're looking for one.
Absolutely. Yeah, a ductless heat pump would be a great application for a tiny home. They're available in a range of sizes, and they use a variable speed motor, which gives them variable capacity. So if even the smallest model was larger than what you might require, it would run at a very low capacity, providing you exactly the heating or cooling that you required for your tiny space. So absolutely, I think a heat pump is a tiny home is a great application for a heat pump, specifically low ambient, ductless, air sourced heat pumps.
Next up is Sarah Winterton from Carolinian, Canada. Sarah has a local connection and will tell us a little bit about what the organization does and what her connection is to the local area and what the opportunities are. I know that it's related to native plant nurseries and those sorts of things, and what's the potential to boost that sector in this area. Over to you, Sarah.
So I've been working in the not-for-profit environmental conservation sector my whole career. So that's, decades now. And right now I'm working with Carolinian Canada, and it's an organization that really focuses primarily on the Carolinian zone in southern Ontario, that stretches from Windsor along the North Shore of Lake Erie, Niagara Peninsula over to Toronto, Oshawa. So it's kind of the northern tip of the Carolinas that goes, is better known in the US. But in this region, it means that there are a lot of unique species that really only flourish in this area. And so it has a lot of biodiversity and a lot of interesting things going on. It's also got a third of Canada's species at risk. So it's a region that's under stress for obvious reasons like development, population growth, the history of the settlement of the area. One of the things that we're focused on right now, and this actually goes beyond the Carolinian zone, is we are helping to facilitate a process around the development of a Southern Ontario native seed strategy. And the purpose of this project is in response to the fact that we don't have enough native seed to supply the needs that we have for restoration, to supply the demand that is growing for native plants through more of the retail market. Also enough seed to help protect the plants that we have just for their own sakes. And so this effort is looking at all of the different elements that could go into a strategy that will help to stabilize and grow that supply of common native plants, but also native plants that might be rare or at risk. We might be at risk of losing them. And what's important about this is the native plants directly feed into this goal of a green economy, directly feed into the goals of building a future that is climate resilient directly feed into the goal of reversing these terrible trends of biodiversity loss that are just getting worse. And you've probably seen in the news recently about the Convention on Biodiversity that's going on in Montreal right now, COP15. And the messaging up to that convention during it is, globally we're losing species at a terrible rate, at an alarming rate. And one of the main drivers of this is habitat loss. So when you look at the ecological links to create healthy habitat so that wildlife can thrive, it all relates to the native plants that are the foundation of the healthy ecological system. The native plants that are larval hosts for our different different insects that might be serve habitat needs for other wildlife. So as we lose native plants, which we have been losing across the landscape, we're losing that capacity to grow a resilient future. So when we're looking at this, and I'm sure this has come up in these discussions that you've been hosting, is that this transition that we need to undergo in order to address the challenges of climate change, the challenges of biodiversity loss, the transition that we have to go through as a society, as an economy, I don't know if we can fully grasp it, but we know that it's an urgent transition. And the date 2030 looms high as a deadline for having made all sorts of progress on reducing our emissions, getting closer and closer to net zero. So it's putting a lot of pressure on these little native plants, right? Okay, we need you to do this. But honestly, the possibilities as part of a green economy for the growth of this sector are high. And we have a long-standing native plant sector, and there are incredibly knowledgeable, dedicated people who are in this role. We have a really important relationship to be building with Indigenous people around the protection and restoration of native plants as well. And so when we're looking at this economy, the potential for growing native plants and starting to build out these opportunities, we're connecting not only with native plant growers, we're connecting with that network of people who are involved in the horticultural industry, who are landscape architects, or they're landscape designers, or they're landscape installers. We're connecting with people who are making purchasing decisions, maybe within the municipality, around how what plants they need, or purchasing for parks and things like that. So it's quite a network, and I'm missing out a lot of people when I talk about this network of people who are engaged through native plants. But it's robust and it's complex, and it's given the right investment, given the right focus, given some support through policies that will prioritize native plants being used. Like, for example, there's a green development standard in the City of Toronto that mandates the use of native plants that are locally sourced, that meet certain criteria in new developments that are going in, particularly those that are adjacent to ravines. So these standards are drivers that can help to build that market and provide more stability for native plant growers. Within the whole supply chain, there are challenges, because significant challenges around how the demand for native plants is being met without any real understanding of kind of what's happening in the market. So what types of native plants do we need now and 5 years from now? How can we be planting those that we need to be ready 5 years from now and support the native plant growers who are making that investment? So there are many moving parts within the industry that need support. But when we look at native plants as a solution, which they are, to the loss of biodiversity, when we look at them as a solution to creating a climate resilient future, which they are, there is like a compelling imperative to be investing and helping this industry to grow. And it starts at it's effective at the local level. We're looking at plants that are, there are all sorts of, it varies a bit from plant to plant, but certainly when you're looking at native plants, you want them to have a regional source, so that they are truly native to the area, and they've got they've got the history with the local wildlife as well, because these species interact, and it's through their interaction that we create stable, healthy ecosystems that then create resilience for all of us. There's tremendous commitment in Grey Bruce. There are growers here. There's a lot of opportunity for education and engagement. You walk around Owen Sound, people love their gardens, for example. You can just see so many people who love their gardens.
I walk around Owen Sound a lot, so you're exactly right. We need more downtown gardens. So.
Yeah, so there's so much opportunity. So that's, so anyway, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And last but certainly not least, Jana Susi from the Fort County Labor Market Planning Board is going to just tell us a little bit about her job and how it relates to growing the green economy in our region. Jana is the interim executive director. Over to you, Jana.
Okay, well, wow. Hi, everybody. A lot of you are new faces for me, and I am new to the labor market data, but I'm not new to the labor market or economic development. I moved here from Northwestern Ontario about 8 years ago. I worked in tourism and marketing for the city up there where I lived, and I worked for the economic development. So I have to give kudos to all the speakers tonight. I've learned a lot, and what a great intro from Jeff and Steve on what economic development is. Well done. So the Fort County Labor Market Planning Board, what do we do? What do I do? It is new to me. So our role is to provide labor market information to the stakeholders, to economic development, to school boards, on what's happening in the region as far as our workforce goes, and to support the development of initiatives that, so much like Jeff, do I do the work? No. That's not my role. My role is not to wave, and I don't have a magical wand either. My job is to report what the status is of our labor market that is indicated by the data we see, to analyze it, to recommend actions to others, and then others do the job. So right now, I may not be the most popular person when we have a currently, it was 2.3, yay, we climbed to a 2.7. That isn't good news. Our labor market issues are not going to go away overnight, but I'm feeling very optimistic about it. The one trend I will tell you, which is not going to be a big surprise to anybody, is that we have an aging workforce. It's not just unique to our area. It is a Canada-wide issue, but because of our remote and rural areas, we are one of the lowest unemployment rates in Ontario. We have been for 10 years. And that is the access, so the housing and transportation. But on a positive note, there are a lot of opportunities. One of them being everything you talked about today. So green jobs and sustainable tourism isn't new to me. That's what I worked in, was tourism up north. And it is definitely a growing market. And I love coming up to head office, I just have to say, because it's like me coming home. It's a very similar area to where I came from and similar challenges. And I think there are opportunities ahead. One of them relating to the workforce development is how do we keep our youth in the area? Our youth, environmental issues are important to them. Working for green companies and in green jobs is a great attractor. There's a lot of growth. I can't remember who was talking about it, but said you were adding jobs regularly. And that kind of intrigued me. Went, okay, so you're attracting people. Why is that? Probably because they're exciting new jobs to our youth. And there are definitely opportunities there. There's so many things that each of you touched upon that I think are great opportunities for our workforce. And I'm excited. I'm excited to learn more about what's going on in the region. And I also actually worked at a company in the Perth area prior to, that's actually where I came from before I got to this organization. I worked more on a training side of the business before I got into this. And I worked at CRP Plastics in Stratford. And when we asked our employees why they loved working there, it was because of the environmental aspect. So that's a huge attractor in job descriptions. People care about the sustainability, and it is because it's a part of quality of life. They want to see where they live thrive, sustain, and the environment. You have a beautiful environment in Bruce and Gray. One of your strong suits is the environment and protecting it. Super duper important.
Your website keeps people up to date on what's going on with the Flora County Labor Market Planning Board. So thanks so much for wrapping things up for us. And I'm going to throw it quickly over to Jenny to start.
This is a question for Steve. Steve, I think, and we sort of put this off from earlier, you suggested at the end of your presentation that some companies did not turn out and locate here. Does that reflect on provincial decisions, but maybe in conflict with our regional opportunities, e.g. government would not support solar energy or wind generators? Do you want to have a comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely not. It had nothing to do with, it was just competitive, businesses, it was just a competitive environment. So I'll talk just a little bit about the one. I would always promote the fact that Owen Sound had a harbor because that was a competitive advantage we had. Not many communities have a harbor, and we had an opportunity to import the windmill blades through the harbor, and some of those were done through the Owen Sound harbor. But what they weren't going to do, the windmill manufacturers, is build the posts, the towers. That had to be done over here. That doesn't make sense to manufacture them in Europe. So they were looking, the particular plant was looking to locate, and they picked 3 communities to look at: Hamilton, Fort Erie, and Owen Sound. And consultants from Europe come over, who they hired as their site locator, and they went through the whole business case of what made sense and what didn't make sense. And in fact, they actually learned a lot about that whole process. And so we were in the running, but in the end, I believe they located in Fort Erie. Our challenge was we didn't really have a big building, and the number of welders they were going to need was probably as many welders as we had in the entire community. But so the other factor that was a big limiting factor was we didn't have rail. And you don't really know until you get into the specifics of the company. The big issue with the rail was that the steel they were going to use could only come out of one plant in the States, because it had to be a certain massive thickness. So the long short story is sometimes it's government policy, provincial or federal, but often it's just the unique pros and cons of your areas versus another area.
Okay, fair enough. And Joyce had a question about the trade. This could be for anybody, but it really has to do with, are there jobs coming up locally in the building trades, particular to new low emissions building tech, such as heat pumps, solar and wind installations?
Certainly, there is a huge demand in all trades in the building, residential building that I'm involved with, from my mechanical sector to framing, roofing, drywalling to concrete. I am involved with contractors in all those sectors, and am asked frequently if I know anybody that's looking for a job. And I always jokingly giggle and ask them the same question back to themselves as well.
Yeah.
So large demand, and it is slightly limited in the skilled trades by that apprenticeship thing. Like I said myself, I really cannot bring on anybody in an apprenticeship role beyond a laborer in our current status. And any red seal trades that are governed by these ratios, it's a tough thing. So yeah, I think Dana mentioned our aging market. We've experienced that ourselves. We have had several very senior technicians retire, and especially in the trades, that tends to, I think, happen a little sooner, because you can't do this physical work for as long, because your body wears out. So
there is a significant issue. There's a big hole.
Yeah. Yep. There's a big hole. Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Jeff, do you have any comment on that? Or Jeff, is there anything that's going through your head right now in terms of what you've heard and from Eve to this evening?
Sure.
Heard.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that one of the things that was underlying all of the speakers today is probably the word business case. And how do we make the business case to do these types of things, to employ more people, to make green economy something worth doing, whether that's fit funding, whether that's finding businesses who have the social, the environmental push to make it valuable for them. But at the sort of underlying all of this and what we do on the economic side, help develop those, grow those, and push for them. And the green economy is a target for our area and will continue to be a target. The green economy is today what creative workers were in the early 2000s. They are.
I was feeling disappointed, or I was disappointed, and I continue to be, that you have energy but not clean energy in your strategy, whereas Gray specifically talks about clean energy. So clearly there is an awful lot going forward that we need to do. I'm wondering, Barry, do you want to just kind of do a little bit of a wrap up, and then we can let people go off their merry way?
Yeah, great. Well, I appreciate Jeff's sort of final comment there. And what came into my mind was remembering a ecosystem services program that has a dollar bill on a tree, and it basically says that, you know, if we assign a dollar value to the environment, the business case part of it needs to be aligned with the value of the environment. So I think I've really appreciated a lot of the perspectives that have come forward tonight, and what I'd certainly like to suggest to the hosts is that there's an opportunity to broaden the scope on this, or zero in on some particular topics. And I know Lee's probably going to mention what's coming up in the future, but I would just like to say how exciting it was to hear from everybody and the variety of opinions, and to start to bring together in this Zoom platform common opinions and common ideas to move the green economy further in our areas.
Thanks, Barry. You've been a great host as well. And it seems to me there's a lot of advocacy and action pieces that come out of this that I don't want to take everybody's time, but, you know, thinking about the kind of work that we can learn more about and then act on. That's what excites me. The other thing that excites me is hearing back from all of you about how we're doing with our climate forums. And we're going to send out a link that I think is already in the chat, asking for your feedback as we do our planning for next year. So I really would hope that you would do that. And we don't want a green Christmas. We want a white holidays, but be green if you can.
And January is right around the corner. We're going to talk about retrofitting your house. Joachim Mostertag is going to come back as a guest host for that. And I want to thank Barry. I want to thank our audience too. Our audience, you were great. And thank you for taking the time on a Thursday night to attend. We're on every third Thursday. In case you lose track of us or in case you lose the links, just third Thursdays. That's us, Sustainability Project. Being alongside Jenny and Barry here, I learned a lot from all our panelists as well.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot.